critical care is a kind of state of health versus a place. And so, like for example, the cath lab sees critically ill patients. And so a lot of cath lab nurses take the CCRN, same with PACU actually. So if a nurse works step down, like IMCU, progressive care, tele, then there is a different exam for them, and it's called the PCCN exam. So I think just working in an area where you take care of critically ill patients is key. And like I said, a lot of like strict ICU type nurses take the exam. Like for example, emergency nurses take the CCRN exam frequently because they have critically ill patients in their areas. So, so it does not specify what type of an ICU it has to be.
Getting your CCRN for CRNA School. In today's episode, we're going to talk about all the ins and outs of getting your CCRN with a special guest. So let's go ahead and get into today's show. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Finnell, and today we have a very special guest, Nicole Kupchik, who owns Nicole Kupchik and Consulting, and she's the guru in the space of CCRN, CMC, CSC. So if you're thinking you're looking for a way to get the best of the best review course to get your CCRN, this is by far my biggest recommendation. Nicole has been highlighted in our community over the last 3 years, just shouted from the rooftops how excellent her educational courses are. So welcome, Nicole, to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jenny.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. The CCRN is the topic for today. And sorry I didn't actually say that, but today we're going to kind of discuss what it is you need to know about the CCRN as far as when can you take it and how do you qualify to take it and things of that nature, as well as, maybe some things that are, someone who educates and teaches this topic, kind of some things you should know to better improve your odds at passing the test on the first attempt, because I think that's everyone's goal, is to take this test once and not have to repeat it. So, let's get into today's episode. I think the first question I would love to address, if you don't mind, is let's go over the requirements to take the CCRN.
Yeah, well, so the CCRN, first of all, is administered by the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. And to sit the exam, you have to work 1,750 hours within 2 years. And a lot of people, they can misread that, and they think you have to be a nurse for 2 years to sit it, and that's actually not true. So if you work full time, and you probably hit the hours required within the first year. So again, 1,750 hours. And then if you've been working at least 5 years in critical care, you only need 144 hours in the most recent year, as long as you've worked 2,000 hours. And so I know I've been doing this a while, 30 years, and I still work per diem. So I'm able to keep my certifications current because of the 144 hour.
There you go.
Yeah. They added that a few years ago. And I think it was just a great ad to allow nurses who aren't working full time to still keep their certifications.
I love that. And for those of you guys too listening, again, just to repeat it, that's 1,750 hours. And I do find that usually when you're working 36 hours a week, you hit that benchmark right around your first year. Now, if you're working overtime, you could hit it sooner. I know many of you are equally working more than 36 hours a week. So just keep that in mind, that it's not one or the other, it's whatever comes first. And those of you who are part-time, and it's okay to be part-time, but let me just reference, since this is a CRNA School podcast, that CRNA School programs, in fact, this was a recent question in our community about working part-time. Most schools want to see you work full-time. And so if you've been part-time, it really is in your best interest to go back full-time in the ICU. When you're considering all the other candidates you're applying up against, and if you're part-time, especially if it's been for several years, I believe the student had been part-time for at least 6 years, it's just, schools are going to have a problem with that. And again, this was commented on by CRNA faculty themselves. So I want to at least put that out there as well, that if you're part-time, to venture back to full-time for your CRNA application, at least for the year preceding your application. So thank you so much for clarifying that. Another thing too, I would love to talk about as far as the requirements is something that I kind of stumbled upon because I saw a lot of students doing this and asking me this question was, hey, Jenny, at the time I sit for the test, I'll meet the hour requirements, but not at the time of application. And I actually emailed the AACN because we actually had some courses through them and I have a contact. So I was like, hey, I keep getting this question and I want to make sure I'm answering it the right way. And the answer was no. The answer was that you actually have to have the 1750 hours at the time of application, not at the time of testing. So keep that in mind as well. And then do you know, can we talk maybe a bit about like ICU requirements? I think that's also kind of a gray area as far as what is it real specific ICU or is it like step down, just true ICU?
Yeah, I think one of the ideas is critical care is a kind of state of health versus a place. And so, like for example, the cath lab sees critically ill patients. And so a lot of cath lab nurses take the CCRN, same with PACU actually. So if a nurse works step down like IMCU, progressive care, tele, then there is a different exam for them, and it's called the PCCN exam. So I think just working in an area where you take care of critically ill patients is key. And like I said, a lot of like strict ICU type nurses take the exam. Like for example, emergency nurses take the CCRN exam frequently because they have critically ill patients in their areas. So it does not specify what type of an ICU it has to be.
All right, great. That's great. Thank you for clarifying. I love that too, because a lot of nurses, they don't know they want to do CRNA. And so they maybe in fact, a lot of nurses get exposed to anesthesia while working in places like the cath lab or PACU or the ER. They see anesthesia come to the bedside to do central lines, or they speak to them a lot in PACU. I loved my cath lab, nurses. They could hold an airway. Let me tell you that. They were really good at holding airways because a lot of those doctors had sedation privileges, and they would get cases over there that weren't involved with anesthesia. So again, they were very highly trained nurses. And so you can work on your CCRN while you're in that position, but just be sure to venture into the actual ICU before you apply to CRNA school. I get asked pretty frequently if things like cath lab, PACU, OR, pre-op count, and they just don't. The ER, again, is one of those questionable units as well, mostly because most schools don't see ER as long-term management of ICU patients. They understand you critically.
They should come take a visit in the hospitals now with all the backups, right?
Well, true, exactly. And well, the thing is, some hospitals have holding areas in the ER for like ICU patients. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, some schools don't. And I had a student come to me and they're like, I don't understand. It's a true ICU holding area in the ER, but the program that they were applying to didn't want to accept that. So I guess just check with your program first before you settle on that area. But thank you for that. And then let's go over, what is the CCRN as far as what categories are you tested on? And it's also weighted.
Yeah, so they do like an 80-20 split. So 80% of the exam comes from an area called clinical judgment, and 20% comes from an area called professional caring and ethical practice. And I honestly find the professional caring and ethical practice questions are a little bit challenging to study for because they'll give you like a situation and you've got to pick the best answer when like two of them could be totally fine, acceptable things to do, right? So, but 80%, again, clinical judgment. So that includes 18% cardiac, 17% pulmonary, and then they clump together endocrine, hematology, renal, GI, and tegumentary, and that accounts for 20% of the exam. And then they clump together neurology, musculoskeletal, psychosocial, that accounts for 13% of the exam. And then 14% is multi-system. So that all makes up 80% of the exam. And then, like I said, 20% is professional caring and ethical practice.
Okay, awesome. So it's like the type of test that nobody likes in nursing school. That's just to select the best answer.
Yeah. 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 But one of the cool things for the exam, and when I teach review courses, I kind of go over like a lot of like what to expect, but I feel like the NCLEX has gotten a little bit psycho. I'm pretty sure it's got a little cuckoo. But anyway, so I always tell nurses, like, this is not that type of exam. They're not trying to trick you. They're legitimately trying to assess your knowledge. And so they got rid of questions that are stated like this: all of the following are true except. They got rid of those types of questions.
Nice.
There's no multi-select. There's no all of the above. There's no none of the above. Nice. It's content, a question, 4 options, A, B, C, D, and only one is the answer. And so like I always tell nurses, like when you're on, you've got a question and you're stuck in between two, just say to yourself, if I could only do one thing, what would be the most important one thing I could do right now?
Awesome.
And I mean, I think that's just good strategy for answering a lot of the questions on the exam.
Yeah, I love that. And I equally think that's a great strategy just for testing going forward, period, to just kind of try to, because there's always usually at least a few questions that are like, yeah, but I like both those options. And kind of what I do, and I know I've mentioned this on previous podcasts, and I take all my tests this way. I had ever since I kind of figured out my routine in undergrad when I wasn't getting good grades and I went to getting good grades, is I really started routinely practicing reading the question and not looking at the answers and determining the answer before I read the options.
That's one of my test taking strategies is I'll tell nurses just kind of like either don't read the answers or kind of cover them up with your hand.
Yes.
Guess the answer. And if it's there, choose it and move on. Because I think nurses get really kind of, they can psych themselves out on an exam. Exam's tough. You have to go in prepared. And I think they psych themselves out. One of the things I always do in class is I always make people hold up their pinky and pinky swear that they will not change their answers. because how many times have we ever walked into a patient's room and you're like, oh, that patient doesn't look good. You may not say that, but you're thinking it in your head. We've got good gut instinct. And so I tell nurses the same thing, like use your gut. Look at the question, think about what the answer is. If it's there, choose it, move on. Do not go back to that question. So when I talk to nurses who don't pass, it's usually by 1 or 2 points, and everyone has the same thing in common. They change their answers.
Ah, yes.
So, truly it's important. Don't change your answer. Don't change your answer. Choose your, skip the question. I always tell nurses, just skip the question. If you're not sure, to skip it. Because on the exam, you can navigate the exam however you want. Like I am superstitious, so I never start with question 1. I always start with question 50. And I have adult onset ADD, I'm pretty sure. And so I self-diagnosed, of course, but I hop around 5 questions at a time till it's done. So
nice. Okay. Well, no, but that technique, what I like about it too, and I've done that too, is if you don't know an answer, sometimes it helps to continue going down the test to read other questions, because it can jog your memory and you can be like, oh, I know the answer to this question. It helped me jog my memory to answer the other question. And it can allow you to kind of get more clear on maybe what the answer could be.
Yeah, no, the other thing too I've found is like you'll find answers to some questions in other questions. It's really funny how that happens. Like, oh, okay. But just don't change your answers. You have to all promise.
I love that. That's great. Great advice. So I guess, would you say, I know we actually briefly talked about this earlier, and it's hard to pinpoint any one area, but I'm sure everyone's kind of wondering this question, so we're just going to ask it. But if you had to pick like an area that nurses tend to struggle with in the exam, what would it be if you had to say there was an overarching theme, or is it really just vary?
Yeah, I think it truly does vary depending on what area nurses work in. I will say, I find cardiac is one of those areas. I think it's tough. Hemodynamics is part of cardiac, and a lot of nurses work in units who don't even look at hemodynamics anymore, which it makes me insane that, we've just kind of given up hemodynamics clinically with it. Think we can go into the room like, oh, this is what they need. Like that's BS, right? So anyway, I just feel like nurses they don't see pulmonary artery catheters. So they don't understand hemodynamics, quite frankly. And I'll always ask in class, how many of you have never taken care of a patient with a pulmonary artery catheter? And usually over half the class raises their hand. It's usually only in like cardiac surgery areas, or maybe cardiac like CCUs or cath labs that nurses are seeing PA caths. Otherwise they don't understand hemodynamics. So I'm hoping that changes though, as LIDCO and FlowTrack and have better, the arterial line technologies are becoming more widely accepted, and we've got non-invasive technologies that actually have some clinical outcome data. But hemodynamics and cardiac, I would say, is that one section where nurses they'll freeze if they haven't worked in those areas.
Okay. I love that you mentioned these 2 areas, because you guys, these happen to be 2 areas that are incredibly important for CRNA school. Like that's probably the most important aspects and concepts that they will drill you on the interviews, that you will also be drilled when you're in CRNA school and expected to know like the back of your hand while you're practicing anesthesia. Everybody has a heart. So cardiac is pertinent for every type of case. And what's interesting, if you're not exposed to a cardiac ICU, if you think about it, there's always ways to understand cardiac physiology depending on whatever ICU you're working in. You just have to choose to do it. Someone's in thyroid storm, understand why they're tachycardic and what does it mean to tachycardic? Does it actually increase? What does it do to their diastolic pressure when you're tachycardic? What does it do to your preload and your afterload? And trying to incorporate different things cardiac into even a technically non-cardiac patient. Like I was in the MICU, right? But so a lot of them were septic. Well, that plays a role in your cardiac. What happens, to your whole vascular system at that point, and what does it do to your hemodynamics? And so if you lead into all your patients, no matter what ICU, even neuro-wise, why do they get bradycardic? Why do neuro patients get bradycardic when their ICP is high? You should understand those concepts. So great point. And I think that could be an area, especially you said it was 18% of the test.
Yeah, so it's a chunk. It's a chunk of the exam. That cardiac and pulmonary is 35% of the exam. So, you definitely need to go into those areas well prepared for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So,
and what better to, and I think that's also why, CRNA schools really, really heavily rely on the CCRN to kind of be like almost like a vetting technique to their applicants. Because if you, especially another thing to point out too with your CCRN, you guys, is don't just take it. And I hear this, and I have to say, it makes me cringe every time. But people are like, I'm just going to wing it and see if I pass. If I don't,
yeah, I hear it a lot too.
Yeah, and I'm like, don't do that, because here's why. Some of your schools will want to know your score. And if you had to take it more than once and you failed, they're going to want to know both those scores. And so why would you ever lead with going into it like you may fail? Set yourself up for success. Not only is it going to be a confidence booster, but it shows the schools that you took it seriously, just like hopefully you will take CRNA school seriously.
Yeah, but I think the other thing with winging it that I just kind of for me, I get concerned about is I think the main thing you get out of this journey of getting certified is that you learn. Your knowledge is going to increase. And by sitting down and studying and reviewing content and material, you're going to learn, your knowledge is going to expand, and that will help your patients clinically. So I think that's the thing. Like when I get a little cringy when nurses say that to me as well, because it's like, you've actually just kind of cheated yourself, by just winging it. I don't know. Yeah. You might be able to wing it and do just fine. Maybe, but it all depends. It's kind of a crapshoot because the questions are randomly drawn from big pools of questions. No two exams are ever the same. So,
right. Yeah, exactly. No, I love that. Good point. You're really cheating yourself on the learning opportunity. And it really just makes your job more rewarding in general. The more you understand about what you're doing, it doesn't make it seem like, oh, I'm just following orders. And that's another huge thing is when you have good understanding of critical care concepts, you will know why that order is coming in. You'll understand it to where you not only are more educated, you're a safer practitioner, and it makes your career more rewarding as well. Another thing I screened for in the interview is, did you just follow orders, or do you understand why they are asking for this lab or this medication?
The critical thinking.
Yeah. So thank you. And a test that if you're going to wing it, people say this for the GRE too, but that one, okay. Like for me, the GRE is one of those tests where it's like, okay, but equally so, it still costs money to take these tests. And so, all right. So the next question, I would love to see if you have anything off the top of your head, like fun mnemonics or acronyms that you like to share. I know everyone always likes those types of quick.
My whole class is full of them.
Nice.
I'm not joking. The entire class is full of doing cheers and mnemonics. I have a mnemonic for everything because I always say I'm not the smartest, but I work hard and I just have to have ways to remember things. But for example, I've got AEIOU, reasons that you would pull the trigger and do dialysis on a patient. A is acidosis, metabolic acidosis. E is electrolyte imbalances, K, mag, phos, right? And so I kind of go through the class doing all these mnemonics the entire time. We do cheers. You have the heart block cheer. If the R's are from the P, it means you've got a first degree, longer drop, because it's a case of winky bop. If some R's don't get through, prepare to pace that Mobitz 2. If the R's and P's don't agree, prepare to pace that third degree. So the entire course is full of stuff like this.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's so awesome. I feel like
you need
make a song.
Keep it going, right? You got to keep it going.
Beats and we need some music behind that.
I know. Well, I'm usually when I'm live in class, I make everyone stand up and do these cheers with me. Another one is if you're people always forget, if you're hyperkalemic, hypermagnesiemic versus hypokalemic, hypochloremic example. Where does that take your blood gas? Right.
Yes.
And so I always, the one I have is if electrolytes are low, you'll see metabolic alkalosis. Whereas if you drop acid, you get high, meaning if your electrolytes are elevated, you'll see acidosis. So, it's full of stuff like that.
Love that. That's so great.
Yeah.
I want to attend one of your courses. That sounds fun.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I get kind of made fun of on TikTok. People will be like, oh, that's so elementary. It's so childish. I can't believe you're doing that. I'm like, you know what? If you want to go to a boring class, go. There's plenty of them out there.
Yeah, exactly. Heck, no, thank you. Don't sign me up for that, please.
Right.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that's, like you said, why not pull on tools to help you? Because some of it, while I think you need to understand more than memorize, some of it really is about just, kind of teaching yourself how to, and they always say like relating things you learn to either emotions. And when you do something fun and enjoyable, like mnemonics and cheers and dances as you learn, you're creating an emotion, which is joy and excitement and fun. And that, as weird as it seems, that actually helps your memory. It helps your understanding because it'll stay with your brain longer for whatever reason.
Well, it triggers a different part of your brain, because the other thing I do in courses is I'll do audience polling. And so when you're being asked questions, that triggers a different part of your brain. So
awesome. Right. And when you're asked a question versus being told the answer, it allows you to actually think through and pull from what you already do know. I love that. That's great. No, you're a good teacher. That's awesome.
It's gotta have some fun, right?
Yeah. So how long, I know this is going to be very based on person to person, but how long would you recommend for students to study and prepare before they take this test?
Yeah, it is going to depend on how much experience they have and what type of an area they work. So for example, like if you work in a pure burn unit, there's going to be some things you probably haven't seen in a while that you're going to have to review. But I don't know. I would say in general, most nurses, I'd say you need a minimum of 2 to 3 months of studying. And if you're going to commit the time to take a review course, I highly recommend scheduling the exam within 2 months, maybe 3 at the most. Like, don't let too much time go by if you take a review course, because you're dedicating time to sitting and really going through the content. So just go take the exam, right? And don't wait too long. Do it while everything's fresh in your mind. But the one thing I always tell nurses is, I recommend that they do is create, like, if the same way, if you were to like run a 5K, 10K, or maybe like a half marathon or do something like that, if you're going to train for something, like you have to train for this exam, you have to mentally train as well as cognitively train. And so I always recommend, kind of come up with a test date, and then work your way backward and come up with a calendar. And I always feel like a good hour is multiple times during the week is probably better than saying I'm going to dedicate all day Sunday to studying. I think little doses of content review is going to be far more productive than a whole day. I think you're going to retain a lot more. And so I always recommend nurses do lots of practice questions, because during class, when people come to class, I make them pinky swear that they will not deep dive into textbooks from that point forward, right? That they're just going to do practice questions and then go back to the content that I give out in the class, go back to that content and look things over, if they missed a question or something. So I just think you can end up going down rabbit holes if you go back to textbooks and things like that. You got to stay very focused with this exam. AACN publishes a test plan with an outline of what you could be tested on. Stick to it. For the purpose of studying for the exam. Like I said, otherwise you can waste hours going down rabbit holes of, studying diseases that you can't pronounce, let alone know what they mean, right?
Yes. You don't need to watch every Khan Academy video. I don't know how many times I've had students, especially like they get into CRNA school. Next thing you know, they're like, I got to watch every chemistry video I can find on YouTube. I'm like, no. Like the amount of stuff you have to know about chemistry is like this small, and you're going to be looking at all of this and just overwhelming yourself. So it's similar, like the CCRN, just, as Nicole said, stick to the path, it works.
Yeah.
And I like the small chunks, and that allows time for consolidation. It allows time for, they always say when you actually study before you sleep, or not before you sleep, but just when you sleep after a day of learning, your brain actually builds neurons and pathways with that knowledge. that you then can build upon even deeper the next day. So I love that. Because neuroscience, I mean, that's why that kind of technique works. So great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. How can, this is a question I wanted to ask you because I feel like for those out there, some of them are thinking, well, if I get my CCRN, should I go get my CSC and my CMC? And I will say right now, you don't need alphabet soup. So don't focus on alphabet soup, but focus on getting extra certifications in areas that you work that will support your education and your learning on that unit. So if that is the CSC and the CMC, well then do it in the CCRN, but don't just get it to get it.
I think it might make a nurse stand out in an interview to know that they went, not only did they get their CCRN, but they work with cardiac surgery patients. So they got a subspecialty certification in that area. I don't know if I were interviewing, which I have for other programs, I haven't, not for CRNA, but for other programs, that would make you stick out a little bit more.
Right. For sure. I guess I just have some that are like, well, I don't really qualify for the CMC, but they get it anyways. Because they just feel like they just want that extra, which I'm not saying certifications are more. I guess I'm just saying the big picture, if you have 100 certifications versus, and you don't really know any one area incredibly well, because they're going to test that, right? They're going to look at like, oh, okay, they have this certification. Let's go down that pathway. And if you can't really answer some of those in-depth questions, they're then going to say, okay, well, I don't know. I just want to make sure that if you're picking a home, whether that's the MICU, SICU, cardiac, to just go all in on that unit and really know it as best as you can. That's like your area of expertise. Because I also have nurses who are ICU hop. They'll think, oh, I started off in the MICU. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to the surgical ICU. Then I'm going to go to the CV ICU so I can be well-rounded. But what that does, unfortunately, is it kind of dilutes the knowledge and expertise you have in any one area. And they kind of want to see the in-depth knowledge versus just a little bit of surface knowledge and all these different aspects. But I guess how would getting certifications help you advance your ICU career if we look at just in general advancing the ICU career path?
I think just increasing your knowledge, to be quite frankly honest, because like I said, it's a commitment when you take these exams. You need to study, and I can't tell you how many times like I've gotten texts or messages or DMs saying, oh my gosh, you know what you went over in class, I just had this patient, I was able to, like, with an educated stance, advocate for that patient. And like, I always tell this story about anaphylaxis, and because I ran our Code Blue committee for about a decade, and so I saw a lot. I had to follow up on things gone bad, and we had a couple times where nurses pushed code dose epi in anaphylaxis. And patient, like one of them, I tell the story about, had an iatrogenic myocardial infarction because he had demand ischemia from 1 milligram of epinephrine being pushed. And so I always tell the story of, and I make like them do like the I am, like we kind of like do this whole mantra in class, and we talk about why you give what you give, like histamine blockers, etc. And I cannot tell you, I can think probably at least 10 times, like off the top of my head, I've gotten message saying I was able to advocate for a patient because I knew it wasn't code dose epi, because they were getting orders for code dose epi and anaphylaxis, Oh, wow. So again, the journey you go on to get certified increases your knowledge so you can be educated and advocate for patients. That's what it's all about, right? I don't know, and I think like one of the things I'll hear people say is like, oh, I'm not going to get certified. It doesn't make you a better nurse. And like, I beg to differ, because an educated nurse is a better nurse.
Yes. No, 100%.
Advocate for their patients,
Yes, definitely. 100%. And I love that you said the fact that they got an order for that. That just goes to show, and so many times, you guys, you will get incorrect orders, especially we all know July.
Well, and I think that we're all human too, right? And it's like, what areas are you used to dealing with anaphylaxis? It's not critical care, to be quite frankly honest. It's EMS and emergency. Who's not used to dealing with anaphylaxis? Right. ICUs, and so we're not familiar with a lot of the orders that, or the medications that we give for anaphylaxis. And so, one of the things I ended up doing from like one of the cases that had, he had an iatrogenic MI, is I created an anaphylaxis kit, these kits, big orange stickers, and put, listed everything that was in the kit, just because we are not used to dealing with this. EMS and ER. are used to it, so.
Interesting. I guess I never actually, you're right. Cause anaphylaxis, I was trying to think when I first saw an anaphylactic. Well, I guess, I'd seen Steven Johnson's syndrome. But by the time they got to the MICU where I was, they were already, that the crisis had already happened, right? It had happened on the floor. But yeah, I think truly as it unfolded before my eyes, it was when I was in anesthesia. It was probably the first time I actually saw it unfold before my eyes. And it does happen not often, but like in my 8 years, a good handful of times I've seen some type of reaction that we have to address, and that maybe not full.
Contrast dye is the number one in hospitals.
What is it?
Contrast dye.
Really?
It's the number one things patients react to is contrast dye.
Okay, awesome. So probably units like cath lab or interventional radiology. I'm trying to think where else.
CT
IR.
scan. You take your patient for a CT.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yep. Exactly.
No,
this is all really good. So guys, is there like a resource that you know of that they could look up, like the pathway for that? That's already kind of, I know I always reference is it Stanford has a lot of stuff like that.
Well, the anaphylaxis guidelines were just updated. I think it was last summer.
Okay, so, and where's that at?
If you just Google anaphylaxis guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah, they updated them last summer. You'll find it right away.
Okay, through the AACN.
Yeah. No, just in general.
Oh, okay. Okay, just on Google. Gotcha. I'm overthinking it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just a resource.
The national anaphylaxis guidelines. It's still epi 0.3 IM, H1, H2 blockers. So you've got, your diphenhydramine, your Pepsid, and then steroids if needed. And you can use, nebulized epi, etc. So the guidelines are all kind of spelled out.
Awesome. Okay. Well,
but the thing is, like when you're in the ICU and you see somebody whose eyes are swelling up, their lips are swelling, their tongue is swelling, you panic, right?
Yes.
And that's how 1 milligram of epinephrine has been given many times in anaphylaxis, because it's scary. It's scary to see it. So.
Right. Speaking of that, actually, now I'm recalling another patient who had an anaphylactic reaction to lisinopril, and it was more like that angioedema.
It's bradykinin reaction, right?
Anaphylaxis, right? But it's that giant tongue where they, they lose their airway. So we give like FFP and tranexamic acid, things like that for bradykinin mediated. Yes. And that's one of the things like we'll go over in the CCRN. Is it histamine or is it bradykinin mediated? Awesome. Okay. That's great. Yeah. Those are our two different pathways and they look very similar. So great. Well, this is all really great knowledge. I guess where can our audience connect with you? Where can they find you hanging out on the internet? I hang out. No. TikTok. Yeah, well, I'm the granny of TikTok. I joined in July by the urging of my team. But I'm on TikTok, so it's at Nicole Kupchik. Instagram at Nicole Kupchik. Facebook is just Nicole Kupchik Consulting, and then I kind of use YouTube as a holding place for a lot of videos that I do. I'm always shooting videos. So anyway, so there's a lot of videos on YouTube. Awesome. Well, that would be a great place for you guys to go binge watch Nicole. I would highly recommend that. Thank you so much. Reels are probably the better place in Instagram or TikTok. Reels or TikTok or YouTube. And, I do like a lot of shorts that are helpful for the story, for the exam. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Like how to read a 12 lead. Those are nice because it's short and sweet. And I think for most people who are on the go, they need something quick, just a quick win. That sounds like a great content. So awesome. Well, I will link to all those down in the show notes below. Thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on the show. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys found this episode helpful. And enjoy and thank you for tuning in. Good luck to everyone. You got this. You can do this. So good luck and good luck on your CRNA programs. And I hope to never see your face with a tube coming down my throat. Right. I hope that's not the case too. That's not, but you'll be. Although I have to say, just really quick, Jenny, I just got my colonoscopy because I'm in my 50s now. And propofol, I'm a fan. Oh, I know, right? Isn't it the most? I am the newest fan club member. Yes. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed. It was best nap I've had in a long time. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. It's always an honor and pleasure to speak with you. You guys take care.
Hey, future CRNA, as always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so very much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to tag me at CRNA School Prep Academy so I can personally thank you. Be sure to head over to CRNASchoolPrepAcademy.com to check out our blog and gather free resources to help you along your CRNA journey. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.